faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe.
Good evening and welcome to the Phoenix Podcast Show with truly yours, Ken Sharpe. And tonight we're privileged, and I must say it's an honor to have Tina Madeleine Zimuto on our show. Thank you, Tina, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, feeling very lucky to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So I've got to ask you, do you believe luck exists?
No. I guess it's more of a term that people understand.
So how do you relate to it? Like, what would be the real meaning of luck?
For me, it's more of grace than luck. Yeah, I think that it's not some cosmic coincidence, that things happen. I think God has a plan, and He makes sure that plan comes to pass.
So you're meant to be here right now.
I'm meant to be here right now. He knew it before the foundations of
So
the universe
it's His
were
grace.
laid. It is grace. Yeah.
I love to say, it's a blessing, it's His favor, it's His abundance, it's His providence. And I believe that because I actually looked up the word luck. It was only invented in the 3rd century by the Dutch in the written language. It was not written anywhere before that. And I think it's something that we as people tried to use to justify God and replace God.
Yeah.
So these days I actually correct people if they say it's good luck or wishing good luck. So, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But we're blessed to have you here tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're a woman and founder of an organization called Led to Lead Network.
Yes.
And also the You Lead podcast.
Yes.
So tell us your story. Where did it all start and how did you get to where you are now?
Okay, so my story, I'm Zimbabwean, obviously. I grew up in a little place outside of our area called Christian Bank. That's where I live with my father.
So you were born there?
I could say we moved there when I was like 4, so it's all I remember really. So my story, I could say my passion for leadership was birthed probably in 2019. Soon after I graduated from college. I graduated from university in 2018. I was at home unemployed for about 11 months. And I had gotten a job for probably like a month within those 11 months, but I got laid off there. Just wanted some interns to do some work for them. So I hadn't gotten a job, and I was feeling very depressed and wondering what it is that I'm supposed to do with my life. And I remember it was in March of 2019. That's when my faith in God was reignited. And I came across Christian leadership summits. One that was based in the States, another one that was based in the UK. And I looked for one that was based in Zimbabwe and Africa, and I couldn't find one of that magnitude and of that standard of excellence. And I was like, I just felt on the inside of me that maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. And so that's when that desire was birthed in me. So that's how Led to Lead came to be. Fast forward 4 years later, in 2023, that's when we launched it, and it became a reality. It just came from a vision and actually became something that was happening. So that's the origin story, I could say, of Led to Lead Network. And You Lead podcast is birthed out of that, out of a desire to make leadership development accessible to especially the youth, because a lot of the content and even the events that we hold, they're really targeting young people. And so the podcast is there to maintain that connection, and so that throughout the year, because we have one big summit that we hold once a year, but throughout the year, we want to maintain that contact. We want to keep people, being intentional about their development, and so that's where the podcast was birthed out of. Yeah.
Interesting. So I believe your first summit in October 23 last year was the Led to Lead Summit.
Yes.
Tell us about it, and how did you go about organizing it? What did you see happen?
Okay. I think I would start in 2022, probably, is when, because I went to one church for 25 years of my life. And then in October of 22 is when God kind of started shifting me. I joined a new church community. I got new friends. I got a new circle. And God just started opening doors and repositioning my entire life, basically. And it was in January of 23 that I felt like I got that release to be like, this is the year that you're supposed to go ahead and launch that vision that you've had for 4 years. And so in January, that's when we started thinking to be like, okay, what is it actually going to look like? Because you're starting out, you have this big vision of ultimately where you want it to be, but obviously the resources are not yet there because they're just starting out. The team probably is not yet as fully fledged as you'd want it to be, so you're doing most of the things sometimes by yourself. But I got linked up to this person who I just approached out of the blue and was like, I have this idea and I want you to help me. He's become a sort of mentor to me. And he was like, let's do it. And in April, I just crashed and burned. And I was like, am I even qualified to do this? It felt too big for me.
So you're ready to give up?
I was ready to give up. And I remember I went silent on him for like a month. And he looked for me at the end of April. He was like, what's going on? And that's when I finally came out to him and I was like, you know what? I know that this is supposed to happen, but I just don't know how to do it.
So you felt inadequate?
I felt inadequate. I felt unqualified. I felt like it was too big of a dream. Like I'm just some little girl, you know? I think because most of my life, I'm the youngest, the only girl in my family. I have 2 older brothers. And even in school, I started going grade 1 when I was like 4 years old. So I was always the youngest. All throughout college, I was always the youngest person. My surname started with a Z, so I was like the last person in the alphabet as well. So I always felt like, I don't know if I can do this. So even throughout my life, I was always in my shell. And so this was a new thing for me to break out of that shell. And I felt like it was a lot. It was really weighing down on me. But something happened and he was like, you know what, don't worry about resources. We're going to help you do this. And so I was working with him and his team. He has a team that he works with. And so we started planning, we started laying it down because I'm very good at strategizing and like having plans. So this experience kind of helped me also to stretch out into also being a doer and not just a planner. Mm-hmm. So it was a very interesting experience that we had. So we planned it. We reached out to speakers and some people that I never thought would ever respond, you know, and God was just gracious. And you were also one of our speakers. And it was interesting because I just sent an email and I was like, shoot your shot. What's the worst that could happen? I think that's been my mantra the past year has been, what's the worst that could happen? Just shoot your shot. And it was...
just say that again to the camera. Shoot your shot.
Just shoot your shot. You know, what's the worst that could happen? It could be a no, but, you know, that's just how it is. Sometimes life throws no's at you, but just shoot your shot because you don't know what's at the end of that. So yeah, that's what I did. I shot my shot. And we got some sponsors along the way, just generous people that were like, you know what, we believe in the vision. And I feel like that's really been the summary of my journey. And it's encouraged me to see other people who are like, we believe in what you're doing. It's helped me also to believe in what I'm doing and believe in the purpose that God has given me. And so finally we met 21st October 2023 was the first summit. And we were like, if we get 50 young people, it's an amazing start. I'll be happy. But we ended up with about 100 people, and I was so grateful for that. To some people, it's like just 100, but for me, it's like it's something. I'm grateful for it, and I'll always be grateful for that start.
We know 100 times 100 is 10,000.
It's 10,000.
So come back to that feeling of inadequacy, of feeling like you're not qualified, but maybe you're called, knowing that you're probably a little bit shy, you're the last letter of the alphabet, so the last one. You know, tell us some Bible stories about these kind of people.
Wow.
Why does God choose the least?
Why does God choose the least? It reminds me of David when God wanted to anoint the king of Israel, and David wasn't even part of the people that were invited to the gathering with the prophet Samuel. And they had to call him from the field, from the pasture somewhere, and he had to come in. But God always chooses the least. The Bible says that he uses the foolish things to confound the wise.
Powerful.
And so I've seen that. Feelings of inadequacy. I would say the highlight of that, I think, was probably 2020. And I feel like a lot of people probably felt that way, you know, being shut in our homes, not knowing what's next. And I felt really anxious. Because remember, I felt like I got the vision in 2019. And I'm like, God, I'm so excited we're going to do this.
Now
and then
COVID
2020 was like, no, not going to happen. And so I felt really like, did I hear from God, or was that just my mind? Like, is this just something that's fleeting and I actually don't know what my purpose is? And so I think it's always good to remember the beginning. Yeah, remember the beginning. Remember the first thing that God said to you, because from the moment that you get the vision, right, and the moment that it comes to pass, there's time in between. And during that time, there's voices that are going to speak into you that might make you feel like, maybe I'm not worthy to do this. And sometimes it's your own voices and your own experiences also. So I think it's always important to go back to that word. I believe in writing things down.
Did you write it down?
I did. I wrote it down. I'm a diary keeper. So every year I get a new diary. And in every diary, I rewrite the vision.
Amazing.
Exactly. So that's my thing. I write things down. And always go back to them and be like, God, you said this, God, you said that. So even in times of anxiety and depression and worry and just questioning, always going back to what God said, I think has really, really helped me in this journey. Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about the future in a minute. But before we do that, how do you as a young person, I guess you're Generation Z?
Yes.
And do you know that 61% of Zimbabwe's population are your age or under? Isn't that incredible? 61%.
It's incredible, because it's almost as if it's a testament of what is to come. There's so much potential, and it's going to be amazing. I always say that. It's going to be amazing. When you look at the young people, the enemy might try, or situations, the environment might try to discourage the young people. You know, we see a lot of drug use. We see a lot of people having their lives destroyed. But I still feel like there's so much hope, especially for Zimbabwe. For me personally, it's really personal because and I feel like I'm really grateful that God told me to do this before, because my mom passed away in July of 2019. And it was in June of 2019 that I remember when I was praying and I was like, am I supposed to leave the country? Because a lot of people are leaving the country. Most of the people from high school I know are overseas. And people graduated and they left the country to do their masters, to get jobs and all that. And I was here, right? And I was asking God, and I was like, am I supposed to leave? Because in my mind, I was like, I never want to be in a position whereby I am not in your will and I am not doing what I'm supposed. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And so I used to tell the story, but people used to give me weird eyes. That I was praying and God just whispered Mephibosheth. I just thought Mephibosheth, right? And I had to open the Bible and be like, who is Mephibosheth?
I don't know who that is. I know the Bible well, but I don't know who that
Exactly.
is.
So I opened the Bible, and Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan.
Okay.
Yeah. And Jonathan was the son of King Saul.
Yes.
Yeah, the king who preceded David. And so when Saul and Jonathan were killed, and literally all the male heirs to the throne were killed, Mephibosheth was the only one that was left.
The successor.
The successor. So naturally, of course, we know the will of God was for David to become king. But naturally, Mephibosheth was supposed to be king. And at this moment, he was a very young boy. And so what happened was that one of the nannies that took care of him, they decided to run away. And in running away, they were carrying him and dropped him, and he became a cripple. And so in that moment, I was like, what does that mean? And it was kind of revealed to me that when you're leaving Zimbabwe, what you're doing is you're running away. And in running away, you're going to be crippled in your purpose. And so people don't understand. Whenever, even family members, they ask me, so, your older sister, she left for Australia. Your cousin left for the UK. What are your plans? And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere.
Right, hold on to that thought because
Yeah.
we're going to take a break.
Okay.
But I'm scared of God, really. I'm terrified of him. And girl, that's a message, right? Run away from Zimbabwe and you'll be crippled. Hold on to that thought. We'll be back soon.
Faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe. Faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe.
Welcome back. And here we sit with Tina, a young lady who not only puts God in the front of her life, but right in the center. So let's get back to that message. If you run away from your country, you'll become crippled. That's a scary message. I wouldn't leave the country after hearing that.
I wouldn't. And it is a scary message. And I know that it's not a message for everyone. But I feel so honored that God would trust me with such a mandate to stay and help my fellow young Zimbabweans. And yeah, like I said, I just feel so honored that God would say something like that. I know that it's not for everyone. And I would encourage everyone that if you need to ask, what am I supposed to do? Because there are some people that have been told, go there and gain the knowledge and then come back. People have different stories. So that was my story, that you'll become crippled. And I've had opportunities to leave, and I've left, and I came back, and people are like, why did you come back? Because sometimes people leave the country and then they just never come back. And I'm like, no, I'm supposed to be here. And so there's comfort in knowing that I am where I'm supposed to be, even if sometimes things don't seem like they're going quite according to plan, but knowing that at least I am where I'm supposed to be has been really encouraging.
So let's talk a little bit about obedience. I know that it's Samuel the prophet, I think, that said, obedience is greater than sacrifice.
It is.
How do you relate to obedience in your life, and how does that help you?
I would relate to it as it walks hand in hand with trust. Yeah, I remember there's that song, that trust and obey, that we used to sing when we were kids. And I think obedience walks hand in hand together with trust. And you can't obey when you don't trust. Sometimes you might be forced to comply, but obedience works best when there is trust. And when you trust that the vision is solid, when you trust that the person in authority, for example, if you are in a team and you have a leader, and you trust that they know what they're doing, they're competent, they care about the well-being of their team, they care about the well-being of the organization, they care about the well-being of our future, it's easier to obey when you trust. So I think trust is a huge part of that. And when it comes to then talking about God and obeying what God says, we can trust him, because trust is based on a track record. Yeah. Coming out of the gate, God never asks us to trust him. What he does ask of us is to have faith in him. And based on our faith in him, he then performs and gives us a basis for trust in him. So I think everyone can look in their lives and see a basis for trusting God. The fact that you're alive right now and you're breathing, that's a basis for trusting God. That's a foundation for trusting God. And so I do believe that obedience and trust go hand in hand. And when you trust God, you can obey Him, knowing that He has the best things. He says that I know the plans I have for you. They're not plans to destroy you; they're plans for your own good, you know. And so trust God and obey Him because He knows what He's doing. And if He's given you a vision, trust that vision. If He's given you a mandate, trust that mandate and just obey. And even if you don't see where it's going, even if it's a little bit foggy in whatever season that you find yourself in, it's always important to just obey. Not and just obedience is better than sacrifice, because sometimes when you don't obey, you don't know what you're sacrificing. You're sacrificing a future that God might have had for you. You're sacrificing community that God might have had for you that could have helped you in a future season of your life. You're sacrificing something. So it's just better to obey and trust. Yeah.
I love that. And you're bringing up a subject that I wanted you to speak about, because this morning, so every day in the morning at 8 a.m., we have absolute 100% discipline and obedience to the rule that everyone must do a stand-up check-in with the company.
Okay.
So me and my management team, 6 people, every day at 8 a.m., we're standing up, checking in with each other on the day ahead. And prior to that check-in, every day, we actually have a full-time bishop who works at West Prop, and he's there to be a spiritual mentor and guide for everyone in the company.
Yes.
And he does a prayer session, normally from 7:45 it starts to 7:58, so just before the check-in. So just 10-15 minutes of prayer, scripture study, and people come prepared. He gives them a verse the day before to read through, a verse or two, some questions to prepare them. And I came into the end of that meeting today, and what's really interesting for me was the discussion was about trial and faith. And you bring up obedience and trust, and trust leads to faith.
Yes.
But then if you look at it more, deeper, how does the words faith and trial relate to you?
That's an interesting question. How trial and faith relate to each other. I feel that trial tests our faith. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's in the book of James where it says that endurance breeds patience. So in the same way, trials breed faith. Because a lot of us, we can go around. Everybody can go around and say, I have faith.
Do you know what the mean endurance means?
No.
So, well, English, we know what it means, but the original word in Greek, it was written as hupamino.
Okay.
And hupamino is made up of 2 words, which literally mean to remain under, remaining under.
Yes.
So endurance is ability to remain under pressure,
That's
right?
so good. Yeah, yeah.
So it's the ability to remain under that trial.
Yeah.
So keep going with that.
Yeah. So that's where faith is birthed. Yes, that's where faith is birthed. Because I was saying that everyone can say I have faith. Right? Those are just words. I have faith. I believe in God. I have faith. But it's only when you're tested that you really know whether or not you have faith in God. Right? I was working on a project last year where I was writing a book, and it was called Doubting Faith.
That's the title of the book?
That's the title of the book, Doubting Faith. And I talk about a time when, when you grow up in a Christian family, you're very sheltered, right? You only know Jesus, you only know the Bible, you only know that. And then when you leave, and then for me, I also went to a Christian high school. So it was all just Christian. And then when I went to university now, you then meet people of different faiths. And you then begin to ask questions. And people ask you questions. So why do you believe in God? Is God real? I mean, people are presenting to you the Big Bang Theory. Everything is scientific. God doesn't exist. It's people just trying to comfort themselves and shift the blame and not take responsibility. People say all these things. And, when you're a young mind and you're just hungry for knowledge, you take all these things in. And there was a time when I was like, I don't believe in God. And I was like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. And I look back at that and I'm like, maybe that was an essential part of my life. Because for so long I was dependent on the faith of my parents I was dependent on the faith of my pastor. I was dependent on them for prayers. I was dependent on them. They fed me the word of God and all that. So now it was then important for me because I then had to take that step of taking ownership of my own faith and studying the word for myself, seeking God for myself, being intentional about it, and being able to defend the faith for myself, not having to stutter when people ask you questions and all that. So I feel like that was the trial that I went through, of people questioning my faith, myself questioning my faith, and really out of it, I could say that my faith is greater now than it was then. I believe God for the impossible, and I believe it. I believe it for other people as well. That what, just be intentional about it. Don't worry about the trials. The trials are there to prove your faith. Yeah.
I love that, because there's a verse that says, your witness. Your witness only comes after the trial of your faith.
Exactly.
So those of us who are desperate to see the result and are pushing for the result, but don't want to go through the trial, you're not going to see that result, because God is allowing that trial to work in you and through you, so that when you go through it, you know that it was the faith that produced the result.
Exactly.
It was the faith in God. It's not our own ability, right? And they say a man or a woman is never at the mercy of a man or person with an argument. So once you have that testimony, once you built your testimony, hold on to it daily, because that's the thing that will really stand when you're in a desperate time of need, when you don't have the confidence, you have doubts, you have lies being said to you, and you need to carry on.
Yeah.
That's the testimony that you need to hold firm to.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think to make it super practical to people, it's when you get something handed to you, and when you have to work for something, there's a difference.
So
right?
talk to us about that.
There's a difference, right? So when you, and I think this is something that even my parents were very intentional about, because growing up, we would do our part in the home, right, to build responsibility. And I feel like the same principle can be applied to faith, that when you're handed something, you treat it differently than when you have to work for it. So when your faith is just, I believe, is different from when you actually go through trials to test that faith, when you actually have a testimony to be like, you know what? I went through that and I held on to my faith. I am truly a believer. And trials don't come to... I think of Hebrews chapter 11. A lot of people like the Hebrews chapter 11, the part where it talks about David did this and people did that. It talks about faith. But then there's a part right at the end that talks about people that went through trials. And it says, because of these trials, these people are said to have faith, because they held on to their faith. So a lot of people want like the mountaintop experience. But the valley experience is also very important to building resilience in yourself. And I think that's something that can be said of Zimbabweans as well. The things that people have been through, economic struggles and social struggles, all these things, they have built resilience in people. And I think the same can be applied even in our faith and our walk with God, that it builds resilience of faith. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit more about this resilience and the attitude, never give up attitude of Zimbabweans, fighting on to the end. How do you, and I can see you're a deeply spiritual woman. I would almost go on to say, you could be a prophet or a preacher. But if you were to say to the youth out there today, especially to the young people, to 61% of our population,
Yes.
who are in many ways hopeless, who don't have direction, who don't know the way forward, how do you, in your life, every day bring God into your life? What kind of practices do you do, habits, daily routines? What are some of the things that strengthen your faith, that give you the hope in the tomorrow that you can't yet see? Because faith is the substance, and you mentioned Hebrews. The substance of having faith is to believe in things you cannot see.
Yeah. I feel the pain of the 61%, as you said. The times of just hopelessness. You graduate from college and you go to look for a job and you don't get it. You've been at home for 12 months, and all that. I would say, and this is really cliche, but I would say just hope. Sometimes it's hard, but just hope. And the things that I do, I could list a bunch of things.
Share as many as you can, as you're
Okay. I would list a bunch of things. Obviously, reading my word, praying.
So reading the word, the Bible, how
Yes.
often would you read, and
I read
what
my
times of the
Bible.
day?
I read my Bible every day. So every night before I go to bed, I read my Bible. In the morning when I go for my run, sometimes I'm listening to encouraging podcasts or sermons or something just to maintain, because how you start your day is also pretty important, right? So that's staying in the Word. What you listen to is also pretty important. What are you feeding your brain, your mind? What is going into your subconscious? Because sometimes our subconscious really informs the things that we do, and we're not even conscious of it, right? It's at the back of our minds and it's informing our actions. So what you're listening to is very important as well. And I would say the biggest thing for me is the people you surround yourself with. That's a really big one for me. Your community is very important. The Bible says bad company corrupts good character. If you surround yourself with people who are constantly speaking negatively, because we all know the situation that's in our country, right? We all know that not everybody is living a decent life, right? People are having to make ends meet. We know that, right? So what are we going to do about it? I think that's important. And your community is the one that also determines what you're going to do about it. You can have a community where you just complain all day, right? And it's like, but what part are you playing in the rebuilding of the economy? What part are you playing in the rebuilding of your society? And what part are you playing in community transformation, So the people...
Let's hold on to that thought. We'll come back
Okay.
just after this break. Thank you.
Faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe. Faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe.
So we're back, and Tina was saying, what are you going to do about it? That's a good question, Tina.
Yeah.
So what can be done about it? I know that your passion is for gathering and equipping leaders. Your dream and your belief is becoming that reality, right?
Yes.
So how do you live that every day, and how can you encourage others to follow that same path that's helped you to be successful? I asked you the question, what kind of daily habits? You mentioned some.
Yes.
Tell us what else you're
Okay, all right. I'll start with what are you going to do about it? And that's also the heart of Led to Lead, right? We're gathering young leaders. Because for me, my passion is ministry and leadership. So I was like, let me find a way to pour into leaders, right? Young leaders particularly, and get them to be ignited to make a difference within their sphere of influence, right? So we want you to make a difference. We want you to be intentional about it, to develop yourself. So Led to Lead really focuses on developing the person. Because when you develop one person, there's going to be a ripple effect, because that person is able to help other people. That person has a sphere of influence that I can't reach. So maybe they have a community that I could never reach, but when I help them, I've helped everyone else who they come in contact with. And so that's the biggest question. What are you going to do about it? I don't really like talking a lot. Sometimes when I get in a room of people and people are complaining, the prices are going up, everything is just, sometimes I'm just quiet and I'm like, yeah, we know that, right? We know it, but let's speak positive. I was listening to, was it the episode with George? and he was talking about how angels, when you speak a word, like your word goes before you, and the angels, you know, they're ministering spirits. They sent forth to go and perform that and make it happen, basically. So when you're speaking and the angels are listening, what are they gonna do with the negative words that you're speaking, you know? So I'm very passionate about that, about getting people to change the narrative. You know, it's our responsibility. We're all Zimbabweans. It's all our responsibility to change the narrative.
So we're going to come back to that in your dream in a minute. I want you to close with that, but just take us back in time now to Christian Bank.
Yes.
And I'll share with you, I haven't mentioned this a lot to the public, but I was born at a time when my father had a mine in Christian Bank.
Oh.
So that was my first home.
Oh, wow.
And it was a mud hut with a grass roof. My mom was cooking on a fire.
Wow.
Which is the story of not many white Zimbabweans. Many black Zimbabweans have similar stories. But my let's say my beginnings were humble. I started with nothing.
Yes.
My father gave me a one-way ticket, £100 to the UK, and everything else I built kind of on my own.
Wow.
So the message I want you to share from your birth, as far back as you can remember, what wasn't easy? Some of the things that people can relate to. What made you tougher? What experiences did you have that you had to go through to rise up and above?
Wow. It was... Okay, so my mom was diagnosed with renal failure in 2004, 5. So that's from the time that I was about 6, right? She passed away in 2019, so that's like 15 years. She was on dialysis for 15 years. And it definitely wasn't easy. I could see all the things that my parents, maybe when I was younger, I couldn't really digest it, process it, and like mentally. But then I went to a private school. I learned at Arundel School. I learned at a private school, boarding school in primary school as well. And it's not because, and even my brothers as well, they had a good education. And it's not because my parents were wealthy. They really weren't, especially when my mom got sick. So you can imagine 15 years of just sickness, you know, because there's a lot of ups and downs when it come with that come with it. So my parents weren't like wealthy or anything like that. And I remember when I was in high school, my mom, I used to ask for pocket money. Can I have money to buy this? You know, there's this trip at school and all that. And sometimes my parents really couldn't afford it. And I remember this one time, I think I was like in Form 1 or Form 2. My mom gave me like a packet of lollipops. She was like, go and sell these. And it was so embarrassing. It was so embarrassing. I was just... it was horrifying because you can imagine.
You want to sell it to your friends?
Exactly, because you can imagine. I know the homes that my friends are coming from. You know, they're wealthy, and I'm like, guys, I'm selling lollipops, 20 cents. So it was. But those things like really built a determination.
Did you sell the bag?
I did. I sold it. I ate some of them, but but I sold it. And also seeing my mom, like we used to farm tomatoes at home, right? And we had like 2 greenhouses where we would farm tomatoes. And my mom would go into the greenhouse with her renal failure. She would go in there and she would be farming the tomatoes. She would put crates of tomatoes in the car, and she would go. Remember, we used to drive to Arthenitis Spa in 5 in the avenues, and would park and she would park there and open the truck, and we'll be selling tomatoes. Sometimes we'd go with her, we'd sell tomatoes, and then at the end of that, and then she'll buy us hot dogs afterwards. And so you could see the value of work and the reward that comes from work. Because as kids, a hot dog is like, I got a hot dog. And, you know, it's after you've worked all day selling tomatoes, approaching people, I'm like, oh, we're selling tomatoes. And at first it was so embarrassing. It was really, I was like, Mom, why are we doing this? You know, what if I see someone from school and all that? But it really built a resilience. And even my dad, till this day, you know, my mom passed away in 2019, and we're still trying to recover financially from, you know, because medical bills, you know how medical bills are. So we're trying to recover financially from that. And so seeing him trying to build back up the poultry business that he runs, seeing that determination, even till this day, sometimes I look at him and I'm like, wow. the determination of it. My mom was sick for so many years. He didn't leave. He stood by her side. We hear stories of people who the wife got sick, the husband left, or the husband got sick, the wife left. They're like, I didn't sign up for this, all these things. So I think all those stories of determination and commitment, and just seeing those things, even when you're a child and you're not processing it, but it's getting in there and it's being instilled in you that, when you have a vision, when you have something that you've committed to, you stand your ground and you stay to it, and you build it. You work hard, sweat for it, and build it. And so I think that's kind of the energy that I got from my background. It definitely was not easy. So yeah, I think that's what my background would that's the role that my background has played.
To stand your ground, hold on to that vision, believe it, live it.
Yeah.
So coming back to the point of difficult circumstances, I often say there's a book called How You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen. He's a Harvard Business School professor, known as the father of innovation. He wrote the first book was The Innovator's Dilemma. And in his book, he talks about bringing up our kids, and he says it's not what your parents do for you that makes you, but what they don't do for you. And I know you said in your faith, if you don't own it yourself, you never really value it. And that's the same as many things in life, right? So how would you relate to that? And I can see your parents have been good role models. They've done their part in helping you. But what was it that you discovered that you needed to do on your own in your business life, in your adult life now that you're living? How do you relate to that it wasn't what your parents did for you, but what they didn't do for you?
That's a bit hard one to answer. On what my parents didn't do for me. I think they did what they could in obviously raising me and giving me a good education and modeling the way to live life. And it's in probably starting off my business probably is something that I got ideas, because my dad is he's he's very business savvy. So if you have a business plan, he'll be like, bring your business plan, let's look at it. You need to fix that, you need to do this. That's the kind of person that he is. But when it came to actually doing the work, because personally, I'm a planner, right? I took the personality test, and it says I'm an INTP, an architect, right? Which is, what architects do? Mm-hmm. They sit down, they draw the plan, but they're not the ones that are building it. They give it off to someone else, right? And so, as a last born, obviously, there was an element of me that was used to just going to my parents and be like, I need this, can you do this for me? And also having older brothers, they're always looking out for you. They're like, what do you need? You need money, you need this. Okay, let me give it to you. Let me do that. And so, but then now, when it came down to it, I had to do it by myself. I had to get down and do the work. My generation has really idolized the personality test. They use it as a crutch. Like, my personality test is I'm an introvert, so I'm not going to be talking to people. But it's like, no, now you know your personality, and now what you need to do is to find the tools to make you not be limited by that. So you need to be intentional about going out and speaking to people, knowing that your natural inclination is to shy away in a corner. And so for me, knowing that my natural inclination is to just sit in my own corner and be the dreamer and be the architect. So they left my dad mostly, because when I started this, it was just my dad. Now my dad left me to do this by myself and to actually get the work done. Because after a while, he was like, okay, we've done the plan. And then he was silent. And then, occasionally he would also be like, so how is it going? Just to hear from you if you're actually doing something about it. And so I think that's what he did for me. He wasn't hovering over me, being like, okay, now do this, okay, now do that. He just helped me, and then he left me. He was like, go be great. Yeah.
So would you say everyone has the freedom to do whatever they dream to do?
I think everyone ultimately has the freedom to do what they have to do.
So talking about your dream, look at the future. Mm-hmm. Look into the future and see where Tina is in 10 years' time. Tell me where you're at with your business. What's happening in 10 years' time? 2036.
2036.
2034.
2034, yes.
2034.
Yeah, for me, sometimes when I think about it, I get really anxious because I do know that whatever it is, it's going to be big. It's going to impact so many young people, so many leaders are going to gather and be equipped and ignited for transformation. And for me, especially, it's looking at the believer. You look at Daniel. Daniel was a believer in God, but he was embedded in a secular system. But he rose to the top. I was doing my research the other day, and it says that Daniel, it's hard to classify what part of the Bible they should place the book of Daniel, because he wasn't a prophet. He wasn't a preacher. You know, he wasn't out there preaching. He preached. The Bible says that he didn't preach to anyone. I was doing the research. It's hard to classify because he didn't preach to anyone. It wasn't technically, he wasn't a prophet, you know, but he was just a believer in God who was unapologetic about his faith and was good at what he did. The Bible says that he has a spirit of excellence. So for me, it's pouring into leaders to have the spirit of excellence and to be unapologetic about their faith. You don't necessarily have to go sometimes into the workplace and be preaching to your colleagues, but the way that you live your life, the way that you do what you do, is it excellent and is it attracting people, and are you unashamed of it? You know, we know that Daniel was unashamed. They saw him praying in the window, you know, so he was unapologetic about his faith, even though everything around him, the secular space. So for me, that's me. In 10 years' time, I see myself. Led to Lead Summit is going to be not just Zimbabwe, it's not just Africa, but the world. People coming from all over the world together, and people being equipped and raising leaders, having amazing mentorship programs for young people, and also just for me, because I'm so passionate about the person. In 10 years' time, I can't wait to hear the stories of the people that are like, because of Led to Lead Network, I managed to do this, I managed to do that. Because I have stories where I look back to the people that poured into me and I'm like, because of my experience when I worked at Ignite Youth Organization, I have this. Because of my experience when I was going through that, I now have this. So I can't wait to hear the stories of people. I think that's the biggest thing for me in 10 years. And then obviously, I think the 3 words that for me are going to be that I want, even at the end of my life, is God, family, leadership. Those are the 3 words that I want to summarize my life.
So I'm going to take you further. I'm a man of 2050, the billion bricks that we're putting in the ground by 2050.
Yes.
So I'm going to take you now to 2050. And you're going to close on that. So envision yourself in 2050 now. You'll be in your 50s, by the way. You'll be a middle-aged woman.
I'll be a middle-aged woman.
And you're really part of the future of this country. So where do you want to see this country in 2050? And what are you going to do about it?
I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing because everybody has a part to play. Mine is pouring into the people that are going out to do the transforming. So we might have politicians, business people, medical professionals, tech professionals gathering under Led to Lead, but they're not staying there. They're going out into the world to transform. So for me, in 2050, that's I have a vision for 2050, and that's God. Like I said, God, family, leadership. Those are the 3 things. I obviously want to have kids. You know, right now I'm engaged to get married.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's where I see myself in 2050. God, family, leadership. That's it. That's just gonna be the same thing running over and over again right until the very end.
So it's a bright future. You've heard it from the lady. God, family, leadership. This is a woman, a future architect of 2050. Stay tuned. Watch the space. Thank you for being with us today on the Phoenix Podcast Show. Like, share, and forward the good work. Good evening. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so much.
Faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe.